It starts so quietly, you almost miss it. A fleeting remark masked as humor, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a glance held a fraction too long, a smile stretched just wide enough to reveal something poisonous beneath. Most people dismiss it. They shrug, pretend it didn't land, convince themselves it's too minor to acknowledge, until it isn't. Until the next jab comes louder, sharper, more public, designed to cut deeper. By the time they're ready to react, the damage is done. What you tolerated became what you endorsed. This is the first law of power few understand. Silence toward disrespect signals consent. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. In a world driven by appearances, hierarchy, and influence, he knew that respect is not a prize handed to the deserving. It is a boundary enforced by the vigilant. The instant someone crosses that boundary, how you respond sets the tone not just for them, but for every onlooker taking mental notes on how you expect to be treated. Early disrespect is rarely personal. It's an experiment, a probe, a test. Fail it once, and you're no longer neutral. You're marked as an easy target. From that moment forward, you are no longer just vulnerable, you are available. That's why when disrespect appears, you don't wait for a better time. You don't plan a theoretical comeback. You act, but you act with precision. You go silent, but you are anything but passive. This is the first Machiavellian rule of defense. Whoever loses emotional control loses stature, but whoever withdraws deliberately gains unpredictability, and unpredictability breeds caution. Silence, in this context, is not indifference. It is strategic energy conservation. You don't diffuse their insult with a nervous chuckle. You don't let it slide with a polite smile. You don't launch into explanations of how it made you feel. You simply stop feeding the moment. You pause. You let your eyes harden. You withdraw warmth. It's a sudden void in the rhythm. They were orchestrating a black hole in a conversation they thought they controlled. Because disrespect thrives on engagement, on laughter, defensiveness, appeasement. Without feedback, it exposes itself as the desperate power play it really island. Machiavelli himself rarely struck first. He watched. He let his adversaries overextend, reveal their intentions, and commit themselves publicly before he made a move. And when he did move, it wasn't hesitant. It was surgical. That's your next step. Reflect the violation back, but not by mirroring their tone, not with insult or retaliation. You do it through questions that slice through pretense. When someone disrespects you, they are betting on your emotional reaction. They want to spark your insecurity. What they do not anticipate is exposure. So you hold their gaze just a second longer than is comfortable. You tilt your head slightly, as if examining a specimen. Then, with controlled calm, you deliver your incision. Did you mean to phrase it that way? Or, are you sure you'd like to repeat that? Or, that sounded personal. Do you want to clarify before I respond? Each line is a scalpel. You're not denying the strike. You're inviting them to strike again, on record, in the open. Most won't. Because most people who disrespect aren't courageous. They're opportunistic. They poke to see who bleeds. When you respond not with rage but with cold scrutiny, they hesitate. They second-guess themselves. And that hesitation is your first victory. Not revenge, not drama, doubt. The one who plants doubt in others never has to demand respect. They emanate it. But here's where the test intensifies. Most people can handle one clash. What they cannot handle is consistency. If someone disrespects you once and you address it, but later drift back into old softness, they will sense the opening and test again. The third move is to redraw the relationship immediately. You don't return to normal. You don't pretend the event didn't occur. You quietly shift your posture, how you speak, how available you are, how much warmth you extend. Machiavelli recognized the power of public consequence. A single well-timed adjustment not only stops a threat, but instructs everyone else in the room. If the disrespect was public, let your new demeanor echo louder than any comeback could. Withdraw your friendliness, sharpen your language, decline their invitations. You don't have to announce the change, you let them feel it. This is how the respected separate from the disregarded. It isn't dominance by intimidation, it's authority through principle. You're showing the room. I'm not open to that. I won't shrink myself to keep you comfortable. And suddenly, the social current shifts. People whisper differently. They weigh their words. Your name acquires gravity. The one who cannot be disrespected is rarely the loudest. They're the one who knows exactly how to respond, the instant it happens, not with noise, but with stillness, precision, and refusal to compromise. Self-respect for approval. Understand, disrespect is never an isolated act. It's a signal, a tap on the fence to see if it's electrified. One sarcastic remark, disguised as a joke, one sly dismissal, one fake compliment spiked with poison, permit it once, and you've taught the entire room the price of your silence. And Machiavelli would warn, once you're seen as easy to violate, reclaiming your ground costs triple the effort. So after that first encounter, after you've gone still, asked your piercing question, and pulled back, your next moves are equally crucial. Because tests don't stop, they evolve. The next attempt won't look the same. It will be subtler, a smirk, an accidental oversight, a passive-aggressive comment with eyes flicking to gauge your reaction. This is when you deploy disproportionate consequence. Machiavelli's doctrine was never built on fairness. It was built on effect. He knew what most people refuse to admit. If the consequence matches the offense, it's forgettable. If it exceeds it, it's unforgettable. You're not acting out of rage. You're sending a signal. You only get one chance. When the line is crossed again, you grow colder, not louder. If the disrespect was public, return the message publicly, but surgically. They make a snide comment. You pause, stare, then answer someone else instead. They ask you a question. You offer a clipped, one-word reply and redirect your attention. They extend warmth to reclaim footing. You give them the social equivalent of a locked door, polite, formal, distant. This is not aggression. This is removal. You're not trying to crush them. You're showing them something far more chilling. They no longer have access. Most people are not devastated by insults. They're devastated by exclusion from the recognition they once enjoyed. This is where most fail. They crave being liked. They smooth things over. They imagine being the bigger person will earn them admiration. Machiavelli would laugh at this naivety. Respect does not grow from forgiveness. It grows from calculated consequence delivered without anger. And here lies your real leverage. People are always watching. They notice the initial disrespect. They noticed your response. Now they're waiting to see if you'll revert or if you meant it. This is your opportunity to sculpt your image anew. Because image, as Machiavelli taught, outweighs reality. Your post-conflict behavior becomes your armor or your exposure. You want your silence to communicate. He doesn't allow that, or she disengages when disrespected, or you only get one shot with them. Once your name carries those associations, everything shifts. People grow careful. They stop joking in your direction. They introduce you with words like serious, sharp, no nonsense. That is your new authority. You didn't request it. You built it one deliberate response at a time. Yet there's a deeper layer. Some people don't care about approval or embarrassment. They aren't testing you for access. They're testing you for sport. They feed on destabilizing others. With them, polite boundary enforcement won't be enough. They either retreat or escalate. If they escalate, you deploy the third-level response. You leverage their disrespect against them. You don't escalate emotionally, you escalate socially. If they have influence, status, or reputation, you frame them with surgical precision. You use their own behavior as your weapon. Perhaps you smile and say, "Interesting comment, do you tell that one at work too?" Or, "If that's how you speak to friends, I'd hate to hear you with strangers." Or, "I'm surprised you'd say that out loud." You're not fighting, you're spotlighting. You're making them wear their own words in public. This is when their bravado withers, not because you overpowered them, but because you made the room see them as they really are. Small, noisy, insecure. This is Machiavellian retaliation at its purest. It's never loud, never frantic. It's measured, targeted, and executed with such calm that your opponent doesn't realize they've been cornered until they're already trapped. And you remain composed, unflinching. You let their disrespect hang in the air like smoke and then compress it into a mirror they cannot escape. That is how you accumulate power through silence, not merely by refusing to react, but by turning every violation into a step toward their own exposure. Once you master this, you no longer chase respect. It follows you. Because now they all know. You don't argue, you don't explain, you don't tolerate. You end things quietly, surgically, and without return. Most people misunderstand the nature of disrespect. It doesn't flourish because aggressors are bold. It flourishes because they feel safe. They insult when they think you won't act. They mock when they assume there's no cost. They push because they're certain you've never pushed back. That's their fuel, the assumption of your inertia. But Machiavelli understood a different kind of power, not the power of constant retaliation, but the power of possibility, the quiet, unsettling knowledge that at any moment you could respond in a way they did not foresee and cannot contain. This is the next stage. You become a threat without threatening. You never say it. You never advertise it. You simply become harder to predict. From now on, when someone disrespects you and you've already established your boundary, your aim is not to win them over. It is to make them uncertain, not terrified, not cowed, just unsure. Did I go too far? Why are they so quiet? What are they thinking? That uncertainty is your armor, because the unpredictable person is the one others sidestep. This is why Machiavelli cautioned against being too transparent, too consistent, too easy to read. A leader who can be mapped can be manipulated, but a leader who responds once coldly, precisely, and then recedes again into stillness becomes an anomaly, and anomalies shift dynamics. People begin to defer not from fear, but from instinct. The mind protects itself from what it doesn't fully understand. So you lean into that. Speak less than others. Observe longer than is comfortable. Deliver fewer words but heavier ones. Every syllable should land like a stone dropped in a silent pond. And here is the psychological twist most miss. Respect does not stem from being liked. It stems from the steady, disciplined refusal to trade your dignity for acceptance. In a world built on tests, probes, and subtle power plays, your silence, your distance, and your precision become more than a defense. They become your aura. And in that aura, you will never again have to ask for respect. It will arrive unspoken because you've already taught the room what it costs to cross you. It isn't born from being liked. It's born from being sensed, felt in the room before a word is spoken. You walk in and the conversation compresses. Voices dip, shoulders adjust. That isn't popularity. It's presence. Presence roots itself in contradiction. You aren't constantly loud, yet when you intervene, your words land like strikes. You don't try to control every scene, yet you will not tolerate being crossed. You never beg for esteem, you cut access the instant a border is breached, and that quiet removal becomes your silent sanction, an unspoken penalty wrapped in composed authority. The final evolution few reach is learning to treat slights as data rather than wounds. Everyone else senses an insult and recoils. You catalogue it. You hear the barb and register a profile. Insecurity, envy, projection, fear of insignificance. Whatever the motive, the attack reveals the attacker more than it harms you. You don't flinch because you can see the need beneath the mockery. You don't rush to fix your feelings because your aim is not emotional cleanup, but strategic appraisal. After the insult, you decide, without spectacle, do they retain access to my time? Should they be sidelined openly or allowed to fade quietly? Will their behavior serve as a warning to others or be erased like water on glass? Your response is not mercy or impulse, it is position. In Machiavellian terms, you are not simply playing social chess, you are engineering the board. Once you act once you convert a moment of disrespect into a lasting adjustment, everything recalibrates. People who saw the incident watch to see whether your posture was genuine or theater. If you hold your line without exploding, apologizing, or pleading for understanding, observers feel something rare: certainty. That certainty is a currency more valuable than charm in a world addicted to approval. It means your warmth becomes optional, not automatic. You give smiles when they serve you. You offer conversation when it aligns with your boundaries. Access becomes earned, not gifted. That scarcity of engagement turns your presence into leverage. Rooms slow when you enter. Interruptions cease. Your sentences are echoed later because they were sparse and precise. You stop being one player among many and become the environment people move through you, instead of you moving with them. This posture requires subtraction. Remove reactivity, neediness, long explanations, and the habit of excusing small violations as just a joke. Those concessions are the rot that invites repeat offenses. Replace them with withdrawal, measured consequence, and unvarnished self-enforcement. When someone provokes again, this time subtler, softer, you must escalate the social cost in a way that's disproportionate to the petty offense, because equality of response is forgettable. Cold, formal distance wounds deeper than hot retaliation. Answer a public slight with a pointed silence. Give an invasive question a clipped, one-word reply. Redirect their attempt to reclaim warmth into a polite closing of a door. The most painful thing for many is not being insulted. It's being refused the recognition they once enjoyed. That removal teaches faster and lasts longer than any loud confrontation. Some antagonists won't be shamed by social exclusion. They crave destabilization and will press harder to provoke. For those, your method morphs. You weaponize their own words and the audience they sought. Make the offender wear their remark in public. Ask almost casually, "Is that how you speak at work?" Or, "Do you say that to everybody?" Spotlighting their behavior strips away their assumed cleverness and reveals their insecurity. You are not attacking, you are exposing. The room turns inward on them, and their bluster deflates because you converted the attempted power play into a mirror they cannot ignore. Do it with calm, measured timing. Never sprint to the finish. The elegance of the maneuver is in the restraint. The offender often does not recognize the trap until the social consequences have already accumulated. Control of the field comes less from crushing opponents than from becoming unreadable. Predictability is vulnerability. When you are transparent, you can be anticipated and therefore manipulated. But when you respond once cold, precise, and then retreat into inscrutability, you become anomalous. People instinctively shield themselves from what they cannot comprehend. That instinct becomes your proxy for dominance. Your silence no longer reads as submission, it reads as preparation. People begin to hedge their words, to measure tone, to think twice before hauling out casual cruelty. Your reputation becomes an invisible fence. Crossing it costs more than most are willing to pay. Power, in this register, is not noise. It is the discipline to conserve energy and the patience to apply consequence in a way that educates the room rather than feeds the drama. There is a deeper calculus at work. Once you convert an incident into a marker of expectation, you must constantly revalidate it through behavior. Reputation is not static. It is tested with each new interaction. If you respond with standing composure when provoked, and then let softness seep back later, the lesson dissolves. Consistency, the repeated silent enforcement of boundary, is what cements your status. You don't need to entertain every slight. You only need to make the cost of repeating it intolerable. The people who cease their disrespect after being checked are not your adversaries. They are students who learned a lesson. The repeat offenders, the manipulators who find indirect ways to erode you, are the ones you remove from access entirely. You do not humiliate them publicly for sport. You disallow them proximity where their behavior can matter. Sometimes disappearance is the most effective sanction. You rise while they shrink into irrelevance, exposed by their own inability to adapt. At the moment someone recognizes they were wrong, your reaction determines legacy. You can punish, forgive, or do something subtler and more terrifying. Grant a form of mercy that carries no warmth. Offer no lecture, no soft hand to soothe. Maintain your composure and let them live in the new reality you established. That kind of mercy communicates a brutal message. I am no longer invested in you. That is sometimes more disorienting than retaliation because it strips them of the control they sought. Discovering you were never dependent on their validation is a wound many cannot heal. You don't gloat, you simply remain unchanged. Your indifference frames the apology as inadequate, the past as unrepairable in terms of access. This is not vindictiveness, it is outcome management. You have shaped the narrative, and in shaping it, you sculpt how others will see both you and the transgressor. All of this culminates in a form of selective presence. You elect when to engage and with whom, and that election itself becomes a gatekeeping power. People who previously took you for granted now find themselves calculating whether they will be seen in your orbit. Your energy acquires weight. Your silence becomes a tool. You no longer excavate every slight for emotional truth. You assess its strategic implication and act accordingly. That is the apex of social sovereignty, not to be the loudest, but to be the person whose attention is scarce and therefore meaningful. In that scarcity, you are both shield and standard. Others measure their language against you. They moderate their impulses, not because they fear you personally, but because you have made disrespect expensive. This is Machiavelli's enduring lesson, applied not to thrones, but to daily interactions. Authority is built through controlled consequence, strategic withdrawal, and the relentless protection of limits. It is not cruelty, it is governance of one's emotional territory. You do not have to punish every slight to be respected. You do have to ensure that the cost of repeating slights is reliably high. Do that, and your absence will weigh as heavily as your presence. People will begin to correct themselves in your orbit. They'll soften jokes, temper sarcasm, and keep a respectful distance, because they've learned that you do not negotiate your dignity. When that happens, you have not only defended yourself, you have reshaped the environment so that respect becomes the path of least resistance. That, ultimately, is how you win, not by dominating with noise, but by mastering the rare power of disciplined stillness, calibrated consequence, and the quiet, irrevocable withdrawal of access.